projects were based on climate-informed design. Working hand in hand with a global center on adaptation to launch the African Adaptation Acceleration Program in 2021, the African Development Bank has set a goal to double its climate financing to $25 billion for adaptation by 2025. But adaptation alone is not enough. Mitigation also matters. In the Sahel region, the African Development Bank launched a $20 billion project, the Desert to Power, a huge solar initiative that will make Africa a renewable energy powerhouse, producing electricity to over 250 million people. In Senegal, a project financed by the African Development Fund, the concessional window of the African Development Bank Group, and the Global Environment Facility is not only restoring ecological balance to Lake Gayas, it is also improving access to abundant supplies of clean water.
Actuellement dafa am njariñ quoi ci gox bi parce que ne yaa ngi gis sa bopp quoi ci gox bi waaw ñu ngi gis seen bopp ci affaire napp bi.
Through its transformational projects, the African Development Bank is helping countries reduce climate risk and build resilience, another way in which we are making a difference.
Africa is suffering, Africa is choking, Africa is in serious financial distress for what it didn't cause. And therefore, there must be a greater sense of urgency, not in talking, but in doing and in delivering resources that Africa needs very, very desperately. Yes, I'm from the MDB, African Development Bank. We are very bold, as you know, on the issue of climate. You know, we were supposed to do 40% of our financing to climate. We've done 41%. We're supposed to do adaptation at 50-50, adaptation mitigation. Today, we are at 67% on adaptation for Africa, just because we got to put our money where our mouths are. So what we've got to really do, you know, for us in Africa is we have the African Development Fund, where we decided to open a climate action window, because these countries don't have access to climate finance, and they need $600 billion, you know, by 2030 to be able to adapt to climate change. Therefore, the climate action window of the African Development Fund is critical. The reason why this is critical is the issue of impact. What will it do for us? If we get that, we have 20 million farmers that will have access to climate smart agricultural technologies. We've got 20 million farmers that will have access to weather index insurance to deal with some of these exogenous extreme weather patterns that we're talking about. We'll have at least 1 million hectares of land that is degraded that we will be able to regenerate. About 9.8 million people that will have access to electricity, and over 840 million meter cubes of water that we'll be able to deliver. So, and what gives me this confidence that we can do this? You know, we, during this issue of the Russian war in Ukraine, we launched a $1.5 billion facility very, very rapidly. And within 45 days, we had done 24 countries. We promised $1.5 billion. We have done $1.13 billion in less than 45 days. The technologies exist. The platforms exist. The programs exist. That's not the problem. What we need is finance. We can do it, but we have to determine that it has to happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that and everything you're doing.
Cekkeen bu jëkk ba metti wu metti da nga daan xuus ndox bu si ndigg doo jot sax ndox mu baax waaye nga tànk ka rek ndax amul woon benn filtre bu rafet daal ñoo ko daan defaral sunu bopp mu metti lool si ñun xiiboon daf fi amoon si xale yu ndaw yi ndax ndox mi wérul woon
Fati Mbaye depends on Lake Wears to supply her water needs, water that was not always drinkable. Strategically important for Senegal, Lake Wears is a major contributor of drinking water for many of Senegal's cities and urban centers. Dakar alone receives 65% of its water needs from Lake Wears. However, during droughts and the dry season, water levels decrease considerably, damaging the ecosystem, massively reducing production, and forcing thousands of people, especially young Senegalese men and women, to desert their villages.
J'aime beaucoup l'agriculture, j'aime beaucoup ce que je fais. Auparavant, il y avait les plantes aquatiques, il y avait beaucoup de manque d'eau. On avait beaucoup de problèmes parce qu'il fallait faucher ou bien faire des travaux manuels pour vraiment avoir de l'eau. En pleine culture, tu perds l'eau, tu n'as plus d'eau, des fois tu perds tout ce que tu avais semé.
To combat the many challenges related to the lack of sufficient water supplies, the African Development Bank supported Senegal with $23 million to help finance the project to restore the ecological and economic functions of Lake Wears.
Avant la mise en œuvre du projet Préfet-Lac, nous étions confrontés à d'énormes difficultés qui sont relatives à la disponibilité des eaux, mais aussi sur la qualité de ces eaux. La Banque africaine de développement est le principal partenaire du Sénégal dans la mise en œuvre de ce projet, le projet de restauration des fonctions économiques et écologiques du lac de Guiers.
The project will restore the hydrological conditions and ecosystems of Lake Wears and improve the quality of water and its storage conditions, as well as the proper management of the Indial Bird Reserve.
Ce projet a permis, en plus des activités de remise en eau des écosystèmes du lac de Guiers, de redonner une vie à une zone qui était totalement humide, à savoir la réserve d'Indiaye. Mais ça a permis aussi d'introduire beaucoup d'activités génératrices de revenus et de créer des emplois.
Il a un grand impact au sein de notre communauté parce que depuis que le projet est là, on commence à avoir de l'eau potable pour les populations. Beaucoup de personnes, on peut aller dans le lac pour pêcher, avoir des poissons pour la nourriture, pour beaucoup de protéines pour les familles.
Through the rehabilitation of lake infrastructure such as dikes, the construction of irrigation systems, and capacity building, the Lake Wears project is improving the quality and availability of water, health, and sanitation, and it is establishing pollution monitoring systems that rigorously control the lake's water quality.
Les ouvrages qui ont été construits ont permis un accroissement du volume d'eau du lac de Guiers, qui est passé de 1,2 milliard de mètres cubes à 2,3 milliards de mètres cubes. Et cette augmentation sensible du volume d'eau permet aujourd'hui la satisfaction de tous les usages, tels que l'agriculture, l'élevage, la pêche, mais surtout l'alimentation en eau potable de Dakar et de certaines grandes villes du Sénégal.
Mais ni mu setee ni actuellement dafa am njëriñ quoi ci kii bi ci gox bi parce que ku ne yaa ngi gis sa bopp quoi ci gox bi waaw ñu ngi gis seen bopp si affaire napp bi parce que tout le temps maa ngi dem di am jën di ñëw soxla kër gi yëpp jënd si ceeb jënd si dawlin fay ci courant fay ci ndox ak xale yi yëre sol.
Ultimately, improving the quality of life for the people of Senegal is the project's main priority, as well as increasing income-generating activities that help reduce poverty and ensure that access to safe drinking water and sanitation promote better health conditions for the people of Senegal.
Le lac de Guiers est très important pour nous parce que ça a amélioré notre agriculture. Nous utilisons le TIFA pour fertiliser nos terres. Maintenant, on peut avoir l'eau comme il faut. On faisait une culture par campagne. Maintenant, on fait presque 3 cultures par campagne. Je gagne plus qu'avant. Je nourris ma famille et mes parents.
Sabu fi procès bi defee robinet bi mu yokk bu baax ndax ndox mi boo ko rootee sotti si ndaali rek wala nga def sa glace rek naan ndax amatul benn salté feebar bu mu ñu daan indil daal jóge na fi léegi ndox mi wér na benn xiibon amatu fi.
The first time I came here, there was nothing but sand. But we saw an opportunity in the sun. turning it into clean energy. I am working in Bamban Solar Park. That's one of the largest solar park in the world, with millions of solar panels to provide millions of homes with clean energy. One of our colleagues, her name is Nadia, that's working with us from beginning. So you can imagine what she faced and the challenge for her.
In the beginning, they are saying to me, Hadir, you are very kind and very small. You will go to the sun. It will be very difficult to you. But I said to them, I want to try. And when already I developed myself here and already stayed for years, they are very proud. Here I learned a lot of things. I gained a lot of experience from the people, the other engineers, the different culture of the companies that I worked with. So it's really amazing. And when you feel that you are important here and all the management appreciate your work, this is a very good feeling. If there is an issue here, if there is something happen, inverter stop, module have fault or warning, I informed my colleagues here, two site engineers, and then I go with them to check how we can solve it, how many it will take for times to not affect our production a lot. To my friends, oh Hadir, you are staying on site on this sun, and what about your family, your kids? It's okay with them. So wow, makes me so happy because imagine if I am not working here, if I am staying at home or only at an office, I'm not dealing with all of this. This is very boring to me. So makes me feel very excited and very happy, and I want to continue in this.
Only in the ground, it is now also up in the sky.
It's wheat harvest time in Ethiopia's Awash region. In this arid and dry lowland, 2 hours drive from the capital, ordinary wheat doesn't grow well. But the yield is looking more promising than ever for farmers like Cso Database, using specialized wheat seed varieties more tolerant to the heat.
In the past, productivity of the land was very low due to the flooding of the river. It was very hard to make a living being a farmer with 9 children. But this year, I'm very excited about the wheat crop. I expect a yield of 4.5 to 5 tons per hectare.
Kebede's success bodes well for Ethiopia, which produces about half of the grain it needs in order to meet domestic demand. Kebede's wheat crop is part of a 200,000 hectare of lowland irrigated wheat program that Ethiopia started with the support of the Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Program, or TAT. To date, the program has planted 20,000 hectares in the lowland and reached 28,000 farmers. TAT's expansion of Ethiopia's wheat-growing areas into the arid lowlands with a heat-tolerant and higher-yielding wheat variety could see Ethiopia become self-sufficient in wheat production within 5 years.
It's a great success for me. Wheat production is life-changing. With the support of the government and TAT, and in collaboration with other farmers and unions, we have a plan to buy a tractor and a combine harvester.
Climate change, population growth, and COVID-19 related lockdowns are challenging African countries' ability to produce more stable crops. But TAT, operating across 9 food commodities in more than 30 countries, is helping Africa build back better. Its programs have reached more than 10 million households. They ensure food security, fight malnutrition, and improve livelihoods. TAT aims to produce an additional 120 million tons of food and lift 130 million people out of poverty.
In Sudan and Ethiopia, hundreds of thousands of farmers now plant heat-tolerant wheat varieties that are rapidly boosting food security.
In its initial phase, the TAT's Wheat Compact has already produced 110,000 tons of certified seeds of heat-tolerant wheat in Ethiopia and Sudan, reached 1.5 million beneficiaries in 7 countries, 40% of them being women, increased the average production by 40% per hectare, and created around 113,000 new jobs.
TAT, Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, is the bank's efforts to put the best technologies in the hands of farmers. So farmers can become more resilient, increase their productivity, and become agribusinesses.
Next door in Sudan, TAT's climate smart seeds are thriving.
Votre attention, s'il vous plaît. Bon retour en salle. Merci, mesdames et messieurs.
Your attention, welcome back from lunch. I hope you enjoyed the meal. One session left to go. I wanted to make sure that you have eaten well, and welcome to this last session. And this session is devoted to an induction to the mandate of the bank, so to speak, and we have an audience connected online. And for this afternoon, Maria Mulindi will be our moderator, so I would like to invite her to the podium, and she would have the lofty duty of introducing the various panelists. She is a Director of Special Programs.
Pendant que Maria s'installe toujours, je voudrais...
While Maria is settling down, the interpreters, are you ready? Yes, the interpreters are ready to go. Interpretation is available in English and French, so it is up to you to select the language of your choice. And please, when it's the question and answer session, feel free to use the language of your choice. We also have some participants connected online on various platforms of the African Development Bank. We have people connected via our various handles, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. So We have people following this
Do you
event.
want to talk some more? Okay, sorry. I'm sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your lunch, and I hope we are ready to do some work. First and foremost, I would like to thank all of you who have graced us with your presence, and also our family that is online. We would like to thank you because I have seen on Facebook and YouTube we have quite a large audience. We thank you for taking the time out to join us. And also, my colleagues, our staff from the African Development Bank, I have seen some of you online, and I think I will take this opportunity to thank our country directors, our country managers, our deputy director generals, and our directors general. Of rolling out the CSO engagement. Last but not least, I would like to thank the civil society all over Africa, all the Pan-African bodies that have been working with the bank over the last 6 years to ensure that we have something to show with regards to the bank partnering with civil society. So I won't go on for too long because we have spent quite a bit of time dancing this morning. So I would like to welcome the first group of participants to the stage. But before I do that, I'll give you a small introduction on this session that we're going to have this afternoon. So the purpose of the session, we felt it is important that civil society understands some of the bank programs. And this sharing event, first and foremost. During the civil society regional discussions, it became clear that some of the information that the bank shared on their website was not reaching members of civil society. And we thought this is an important time to discuss it simply and precisely and ensure we can take the questions and have some kind of discussions around these issues. The second reason for this session is that most of the policies that the bank has are being updated and revised. And some of it is in response to questions from civil society or recommendations from civil society. So you will find some of our experts from the bank sitting up here who will inform you this is still under revision, has not been approved, but we are going in the direction that you have requested. And the last reason we're having this session is also to ensure that there is a common understanding between bank staff and civil society on the role that civil society will play in these particular areas. So I hope that is sort of clear on the purpose and objectives of the session. The structure we want to have is more of a Q&A, but try and consolidate information in 30 minutes and then have a Q&A because we have quite a few presenters. We have 6 presenters and we hope to break them into 2 different sessions. They will each speak for 10 minutes and then after that we'll have a Q&A for 15 minutes. Hopefully that will give us enough time to engage, interact, and exchange questions. But if this is not enough, at the tail end of the session, you can hold your question until then and we can discuss it after that. Because we really want to go through each of these sessions that have been requested for by the civil society members. So I hope I have covered anything that is to do with housekeeping. Now, what we are expecting of the presenters is to present a current status of their policy documents, to share with us mechanisms and tools that they have employed to engage with civil society, and also they may have success stories or any trending or innovative areas that they have discovered within their expertise that will help civil society to sort of either collaborate or find an entry point for the bank. So without further ado, I shall call our first presenter, Madame Njeri Kenyoho. Njeri is a senior civil society officer for the Southern Africa office at the African Development Bank Group based in Pretoria. She has over 25 years of experience in advocacy, policy engagement, program management, partnership building, and networking, having worked both at international, regional, and national level, both in East Africa and in Southern Africa. She also has helped in developing several tools for mainstreaming civil society engagement, both at the bank and outside. Jerry looks forward to strengthening her engagement with civil society, both on a personal level and for the bank, and she wishes us a very successful engagement. Welcome, Jerry. The second person I'd like to welcome on stage is Dr. Amadou Dosumo. Please help me if I have said that name incorrectly. He told me yesterday, Dr. Alhamdou Dosumo. Okay, Dr. Dosumo is the acting director of the Climate Change and Green Development Department, and he's also the manager of Climate and Green Growth within the African Development Bank. He is responsible for leading and managing the bank's team on climate change, green growth, and climate finance at the headquarters and the regional hubs. He joined the bank in 2009 as a senior climate change officer, and he has also served as a climate change officer between 2017 and 2019. He's a Chad national, holds a PhD and a doctorate of business between Luxembourg Business Science Institute and the School of Management of Jean Moulin in Lyon. He's also a holder of a master's degree in international development studies, which is focused on environmental management from the International Senghor University in Alexandria, Egypt. Welcome, Dr. Dosumo. Oh, God. So the next on stage, we have Issa Maman. And Issa Maman, okay, I have lost it. Issa Maman is the director for the development effectiveness at the bank. I have seemed to have misplaced his talking point. Do you have it with you? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Issa. So Director Maman Sani Issa, he's the director for E&S Safeguards and Compliance Department in the Senior Vice Presidency of the African Development Bank. He is formerly the Environmental and Social Safeguards Advisor for West Africa and Central Africa at the World Bank. And before joining the World Bank, he worked at the United Nations Development Program as a country program team leader of the Environment, Energy, and Climate Change Unit at the Benin Country Office. Earlier, he successfully led several public units and departments in different national ministries and agencies in his home country of Benin, including but not limited to the Benin Environmental Protection Agency and the Ministry of Tourism and the Benin Port of Authority. He has contributed to several regional and international working groups, and he's also been a member of several international committees. He's a professor in physical geography, hydrology, has a PhD in geoscience and environmental management from the University of Benin. He is bilingual and speaks both French and English. Welcome. Okay, we're first going to start off with you three. No, the three of you. We will begin with Jerry, and we will move on to the three of you, and then we will have our Q&A before we request the rest to come on stage. So, if you can put up Jerry's PowerPoint. So in Jerry's presentation will be about the bank's civil society engagement, and any updates from the division. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Good afternoon, everyone. As you heard, my name is Njeri Kenyoho. I'm the Senior Civil Society Officer based in Pretoria. So I'm coordinating the bank's engagement with civil society organizations in the Southern Africa region. So I will be making a presentation on the bank's engagement. On the bank's engagement with civil society organizations, and basically just to give you a flavor of how the division has been coordinating that engagement. So we can start. Next slide. Okay, so it looks like I may need to use my laptop because I think my picture there is covering part of the presentation, but thank you. So as a bank, we understand and define civil society as organizations that are basically voluntary and have a voluntary expression of interests and aspirations of citizens. These organizations are fairly well organized and united by common interests and goals, but they are also not homogeneous. They are diverse and include a range of associations and organizations. And those are just examples of some of the organizations or bodies that constitute civil society. I believe I'm talking to the converted. So this list is by no means exhaustive, but organizations that work in the humanitarian sector, social movements, FBOs or faith-based organizations, farmers organizations, organizations that are advancing human rights, the academia, research institutes, policy think tanks, social media and digital organizations, CBOs, community-based organizations, various foundations, all of those constitute what we basically define as civil society organizations. Next slide, please. So we have civil society organizations divided into three categories. We have those that fall under the category of beneficiaries, usually the recipient organizations, and these are citizens that are targeted for our development outcomes. Those are beneficiaries. Then we also have those that are project implementers. I think this morning we benefited from the various presentations from some of our implementing partners. So these are organizations that participate in not just the design of a project, but rather they do participate and do provide services and obviously are much more actively involved in our operations on the ground. We also have those that we consider as knowledge partners. These are organizations, the policy think tanks, the academia, universities, knowledge generating institutions. These are organizations that we work with in our various aspects and in the different sectors. And they do provide us with knowledge that obviously enriches our programs and operations. And last but not least, we do have the voice of right holders. These are the organizations that advance the cause for human rights. They are calling for more transparency. President Adesina did talk about organizations that must continue engaging in fighting corruption, demanding accountability, and so on and so forth. Basically demanding accountability from the duty bearers. So those are some of the categories that of CSOs that we work with as a bank. Next slide, please. So the journey of engaging with civil society organizations didn't start in 2016, but rather started in the 90s. And it was in 1999 that the bank came up with a cooperation with civil society policy guidelines. That was a document that was helped to help steer the bank in the right direction in as far as engaging with civil society organizations is concerned. And then I think one of the key milestones was in 2000 when we had the first bank civil society committee. It was established in 2000, and I think that was a great milestone in the sense that it demonstrated the goodwill and the determination of the bank's commitment towards engaging with CSOs. And then in 2009, we held the first Bank Civil Society Forum, again, another milestone. And this has continued. The Bank Civil Society Forum has always been an annual event, except for 2020 during the lockdown, when we had to change the format, but also based on the, the lessons and the feedback that we had received over the years, we decided to change the format a little bit and make it a bit of a hybrid in the sense that we now will be holding regional civil society fora, so the 5 different regions, and then we have this continental one. In 2012, the bank developed a framework for enhanced engagement with civil society organizations, and that framework is what continued guiding us. And in 2016, of course, is when we held consultations with civil society organizations as we were, on the high 5 priorities that the president did talk about. And then in 2017, the Civil Society and Community Engagement Division was established, and staff were recruited. We were recruited in 2018. So the division is, really just about 4 or 5 years old, and it is now the unit that coordinates the bank's engagement with CSOs, across the regions and across the programs. And then in 2020, there was an evaluation of the bank's engagement with CSOs. And allow me to just give you a little bit of the outcome of that evaluation. That the evaluation did find out that, yes, we had made great strides towards engaging civil society organizations across the bank, across the regions, across the programs, but a lot more needed to be done. Some of the engagement was a little ad hoc, was not well coordinated. The bank was well known in certain areas, not in others, and there was a need to then step up that effort to ensure that the bank was really walking the talk. And the unit, the civil society division, then of course had to do what we call a management response, where we did make certain commitments on how we were going to step up our in engaging with civil society organizations. And that management report was presented to the board because evaluations such as this are normally presented to the board. And when we presented our response, the board did endorse very, very strongly that indeed the bank needed to analyze its engagement with civil society organizations, especially at the country level, at the regional level, and at the continental level. And one of the key recommendations was that we needed to develop a civil society engagement strategy. That is a process that has started, and we definitely will be reaching out to CSOs to get their input so that we can now have a bank-wide civil society engagement strategy. The other key recommendation that they made was that at the national level, we needed to formalize, create platforms where we can engage with civil society organizations, particularly in as far as policy dialogue is concerned, when we are developing our country strategy papers, but also having ongoing dialogue through what we call the civil society open days. So those are some of the concrete recommendations that came out of that. And of course the CSE strategy, or rather the civil society engagement strategy, we'll be putting all of that together so that that is what we shall be following once the strategy has been approved. And then, as I did mention, of course, with the onset of COVID, in 2020, we held the first civil society forum virtually. And then in 2021, we decided that from the feedback from all the previous fora, civil society organizations kept saying, before we can all meet, at the continental level, why don't we meet as regional civil society organizations so that we can discuss issues that are pertinent to our respective regions, and so that by the time we're coming to the annual CSO forum, we have one sort of message, key message that we bring together as regional CSOs. So in 2021, we held regional civil society fora in all the 5 different regions. We did come up with reports that contained key action plans, and those action plans are what, some of them are informing, or rather recommendations are what are informing our engagement as a unit, and I'll show you how. And then of course, in 2022, yesterday, we did hold consultations. There's been ongoing consultations, but yesterday we had a meeting with some of the CSOs that are working towards COP27, and we also did agree that we are going to have a roadmap a concrete roadmap towards COP27. Next slide, please. So, so we see civil society organizations and engagement playing very critical role in the successful achievement of the high 5 priorities. The first one is obviously ensuring inclusion and participation. CSOs bring the voices of communities. CSOs represent the interests of communities. But more importantly, we want to ensure that through inclusion, that we are promoting local solutions. So we don't want to move to countries and to places and into projects with a one-size-fits-all approach. We want to benefit and to be informed by the issues on the ground so that our interventions are then better targeted and we are achieving better results and improving the quality of our programs. We want to enhance ownership of the projects that we are supporting in the countries so that communities own them. And that is a bedrock of sustainability in all the interventions. So we want to ensure that through civil society engagement, allow me to say CSE, that we are promoting ownership. And I'm hoping that even through this forum, that we are continuing to promote that ownership with CSOs. We want to minimize the risk of failure, in the projects that we are undertaking. In some contexts, we do have challenges, we do have obstacles that affect the successful implementation of our projects. We want to minimize that by ensuring that communities are brought on, on board, are carried along, and continue to give us feedback in terms of where we are doing well, but also where we are not doing well, so that we can step up to the plate and perform better. President Adesina did talk about transparency and accountability. We are an organization that holds transparency and accountability very highly, and we want to ensure that that trickles down all the way from the capital, from the headquarters, all the way to the regional member states. So engaging with CSOs at the country level is ensuring that we are achieving greater accountability and transparency. Above all, we want to maximize impact. We want to make sure that we are improving on the quality of lives of our people in Africa. Next slide, please. So we have 3 tiers of engaging with civil society organizations. The first one is at the corporate level, and I'll give you, examples of how we are engaging at the corporate level, at the regional and country level, and of course at the project level. So those are the 3 tiers where we are mainstreaming civil society engagement in. Next slide, please. So at the corporate level, the first approach is really around promoting dialogue and outreach. So I did talk about the regional CSO fora, the ones that we started holding in 2020, 2021. These are fora that, sessions that we want to make sure they happen every other year so that, we are continuously holding ourselves to account, but also following through on the recommendations that CSOs make when we meet with them. We do have the Bank Civil Society Committee that is well represented here. You did hear the president of PAFO speak. He's a member of the committee. We have Nana. We have a few other colleagues that, Ms. Ghana. They've all served on the bank committee. it's a very, very important platform, because this is where we tend to get the pulse of what is happening out there. And civil society organizations, through their committee members, are able to give us feedback on the trends and the challenges, and also guiding us in, with regard to where we should be focusing, laying more focus and emphasis as a bank. We now do have an interactive platform, and let me just say that this particular interactive platform is now active, is now live, and you can all log in and participate and engage in dialogue. So the interactive platform is up and running. And then, of course, we do also, as a unit, we work with other departments to make sure that we are providing technical input in their policies, in their strategies, to make sure that every document that the bank develops has a strong component on civil society engagement. Then we talked about instruments and resources. We, like I just said, we do provide input into sector strategies and bank policies. We are designing the civil society engagement strategy. My colleague Luther is leading that particular process, and we definitely will all be participating in one way or the other. We have developed guidelines for mainstreaming civil society engagement in the country strategy and regional integration strategy papers. The guidelines are awaiting approval by the board, and we hope that once they have been approved, we can then roll them out, and every region, every country will then have a document that will guide them in ensuring that the engagement and consultations with civil society organizations is happening in a uniform manner, but also in a more meaningful manner. We will be finalizing a toolkit for civil society engagement in the bank's projects by sometime next year. Hopefully we can then roll it out and ensure that where the rubber meets the road, more CSOs are coming on board. We already had testimonies from some of the organizations that have participated, but we want more CSOs to participate in not just the design, but in the delivery of these projects. We do have a capacity building program. Again, that's another instrument or resource that we have that will be rolling out to reach out to organizations, CSOs that we can work with, enhance their capacities so that they can become better at partnering with the bank and ensuring that we are delivering better. At the bank level, we have an induction program for new staff that every new staff that joins the bank understands the role of the civil society engagement division and what they ought to know and do to ensure that they're supporting that. And of course, we do have a Cso Database, which I hope all of you are part of. If you are not, please see us after this. We'll give you the email address. Register yourself. The database is quite important because when we have events, when we want to send updates, we use the database to reach out to CSOs. So if you're not in the database, then you won't be getting to know what's happening. So please do register and become members of the Cso Database. Next slide, please. At the regional level, I did talk about CSO consultations on the development of the regional integration strategy papers. We want to start producing, what we call, country diagnostic notes, so that when a country is developing a country strategy paper, with the team that is charged with that particular task understands the context within which civil society organizations are operating in, and therefore how the bank can engage with CSOs at the country level. So diagnostic notes will become very, very useful knowledge documents that will be informing
I'm
the
sorry,
civil,
Njeri, you're running
the
out of
CSP.
time.
Okay.
You're 3 minutes more than your time.
Okay. And at the country level, of course, I did talk about participation in the CSP process, but also more importantly, the CSO Open Days. The CSO Open Days are really, really critical because that's a platform where we bring the bank and CSOs together, and we really basically just talk about the bank portfolio its investments, and then CSOs are able to tell us, we believe that you're following the right channel or you're not, and this is what you need to do to be able to perform better. So the tripartite dialogue is what will be promoting CSO Open Days, and we hope that with government, private sector, development partners, and CSOs, we can have that tripartite platform going for CSO Open Days. Next slide, please. Yep, so, at the project level, again, I did talk about the toolkit, and I'm hoping that we can continue supporting the task teams. Once the toolkit has been approved, we'll be using that to make sure that we are not just building the capacities of CSOs, but that they are participating and even benefiting, being seen as strategic partners that can also become implementers, just like some of the organizations here did talk about. And not just them becoming third-party monitors, which is critical, but that they themselves also become part and parcel of the partnership that we are trying to pursue. Next slide, please. Okay, I think that's the end of my presentation. I'll be quite happy to take questions. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Njeri. I'm going to ask the next speaker to let's be mindful of time because we already ran out of time in the morning. You have 10 minutes to begin your presentation. Director Dosma.
Can I stand or just sit here?
Whichever you prefer.
Okay, let me stay in my chair and speak. Actually, I'm going to speak in French. Merci pour...
Thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation with you this afternoon. I will talk to you about climate change issues since it is the core theme of our forum this year. Concerning the ADB, we have a strategic approach on climate with a lot of ambition. I would also like to point out that the bank started working on these issues over a decade ago. Our first climate change strategy was in 2009, and it had to do with the management of climate risk and adaptation. That was the strategy that kicked off everything, and on the basis of that strategy, we came up with a climate change action plan for the 2011-2015 period, and we successfully implemented that strategy. It allowed us to mobilize about $12 billion for climate action in Africa. This was a success because according to our estimates, we wanted to raise $9 billion. And on the basis of lessons learned from that first action plan, we prepared a second action plan covering the 2016-2020 period. And this second plan was in line with the Paris Agreement adopted in 2015. And we set two specific objectives in this second action plan. The first one was to allocate 40% of our investments to climate action, bearing in mind that in 2016 we were at 9%. The president touched on this morning. Gradually, we improved in 2017. We increased the portion from 9% to 28%. 2018, 32%, 2019, 36%, and 2020, in spite of the pandemic, we were at 34%, and 2021, last year, we were at 41%, thus overshooting the target we had set. And drawing lessons from all of this, we did something quite different from what we usually did. Instead of having a 5-year action plan, we decided to develop a strategic framework that was more complete and more ambitious and more integrated. So we prepared this strategic framework, which has 3 components. The first one is a policy. It is the first time we came up with a policy. We were used to coming up with strategies and action plans. And we wanted this policy because we wanted to lay down some rules and some principles to be respected when it came to implementing climate action in Africa, at least as far as the ADB is concerned. And the second element of this strategic framework was to come up with a strategy. Since the first strategy was in 2009, and 10 years after, it was necessary to come up with a new strategy. So we came up with a 10-year strategy on climate action and green growth from 2023 to 2021 to 2010. And the important third component is our action plan, since the previous action plan had expired. So we had a new action plan from 2021 to 2025, materializing all the ambitions outlined in the policy and in the strategy. So from 2009 to now, we have evolved with lots of ambition, with a new strategic framework which sets the course for the future. And on a specific question we touched on this morning, and which is at the core of this year's theme, namely adaptation, we have made quite some progress. As VP Kevin said this morning, the world's attention today is on mitigation. That is the efforts we are making to reduce greenhouse gases that are the cause of climate change. Unfortunately, it is established that no matter the efforts we make to reduce these greenhouse gases, the negative impacts of climate change will continue. So we need to adapt. So the ADB has made adaptation its priority in the various action plans I have referred to. And an objective we set for ourselves in 2016 was to have a 50-50 between mitigation and adaptation. We were initially at 70% for mitigation and 30% adaptation in our climate finance profile. In 2018, we reached a 50-50 parity, and since then we have done more, or rather a bigger portion is for adaptation. That is 67%. Outside that, we have taken a number of initiatives in the area of adaptation, like the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, which is an initiative of $25 billion by 2025 that the President referred to. We are working on a new financial tool, the Climate Action Window, as part of the ADF 16, which we hope to launch by the end of the year to mobilize more resources, particularly in the more fragile countries that our colleague Yero handles, and those countries that are hard hit by climate change. There are about 37 of them, and through this new tool, we want to increase investments in climate action in these countries. I also want to point out that we have put in place a number of tools that allow us to evaluate our projects in terms of climate risk, their carbon footprint, and also their contribution to climate finance. So this is the first tool is what we refer to as a climate safeguard system. This is something my colleague Isa will talk about, because when we develop this tool, climate issues and environmental safeguard issues were handled in the same department. You know, these are very close issues, and we integrated the climate risk evaluation tool in our integrated safeguard system. This tool allows us to identify the climate risk of projects, and on the basis of the level of climate risk, we're in a position to identify the measures that need to be implemented. We have this tool for about 12 years now, and each year we improve it by including new elements and new sectors. Another tool is to assess the carbon footprint of projects, particularly in the energy, transport, and water resource projects. This tool helps us to determine whether a project is contributing to greenhouse emissions or it contributes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the third tool consists in showing the contribution to climate finance of our projects, project by project. And this is a joint tool for all multilateral development banks. And each year we generate a joint report to show the contribution of MDBs to climate finance. I also want to mention an important aspect. The ADBs are credited to all climate funds, like the JEF, like the Climate Green Fund and the Climate Investment Fund. In addition to that, we have put in place a number of financial mechanisms, particularly the Africa Climate Change Fund. This was a bilateral fund. It is now multilateral, and the coordinator is here, Rita. She has definitely spoken to you about it. It is one of the rare, or probably the only climate fund at the ADB that gives financing for projects submitted by CSOs. The ADB is also very active when it comes to supporting climate negotiations. For over 10 years, we have been assisting the AGN, the African Group of Negotiators, on a number of issues, giving them expertise and also matters linked to legal aspects, transparency, climate finance, and so on. We are currently getting ready for COP27, and we are working a lot with these stakeholders to amplify Africa's voice, because Africa has a common position on climate change which is updated each year, and at each negotiation the issues are becoming more complex. So we are preparing the group of negotiators, and as the President said this morning, we are getting ready to organize the Africa Pavilion with the AU Commission, the ECA, and to have a platform for Africa to amplify Africa's voice and make it heard on climate change. We need to be the vuvuzela of climate for Africa, and I think this is an area where with civil society we are working quite a bit. I recall that last year after COP26, we organized a debriefing forum in Egypt, and we drew lessons and tried to come up with a strategy for COP27. We are going to COP27 with that spirit to make Africa's voice heard on these matters. And finally, I just want to mention that if there is an issue that unites the bank and CSOs, it is the climate issue, because this is something that affects community at all levels. It is a global issue, so there is global commitment or engagement. We need to make an advocacy effort together so that the developed countries that made the commitment to make financing available to developing countries fulfill these commitments. We talked about the 100 billion commitment that is not being respected. This is a major issue we are working on to make Africa's voice heard at global level. At project level, there is a lot to do. We need to work together to help countries to access as much as possible climate finance. African countries have difficulties accessing these resources. Maybe during the Q&A, I would go into the detail of some of these matters. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director, Climate Change and Green Growth. We appreciate. We'll come back to you for key takeaways and Q&A after the session. Dr. Maman Sani, welcome. Please, let's keep time as usual. And welcome. Please, can we have your 10-minute presentation?
Merci beaucoup, Maria.
Thank you very much indeed, Mariam. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm told that in such a meeting, the challenge is to deliver a presentation right before lunch or right after lunch. It's quite challenging because you have to be really captivating and to keep the audience's attention. And so I'm going to focus on 2 points. And the first is environmental and social safeguards, that you know too well what we're doing, where we stand, and where we're headed. And the second is your contribution as civil society organizations in this major initiative of the bank on the continent. The overarching objective of the bank's work is to ensure the socio-economic and cultural development of the African people by, eliminating poverty to the extent possible. And this explains all the actions that are focused on investments on the ground, but also social investments. But ultimately, when we review development issues, you realize, and this indeed explains why most of you are active in, advocating for transparency and accountability, because sometimes you have some negative externalities that are most unwelcome. As most players in this area, the bank, I'm not going to chronicle what the bank has done, but the bank saw very early on the need to mainstream environmental issues in all its operations and interventions are designed for African communities. You heard the previous speakers who said that the bank is improving continuously. We continue looking into the mirror. We continue, seeing how we can do more. And in that light, the environmental and social safeguards policy, and the most recent and the most comprehensive, I would say, from multi-development banks dates back to 2013, and that would soon be 9 to 10 years since it was initiated. And it had a dual objective. The first was to ensure that all interventions of the bank reviewed from an environmental and social perspective to ensure the sustainability of all the resources. And after 9 years, and based on an assessment, and you've understood that we are always conducting evaluations by listening to you and listening to the various stakeholders to know what can be improved. And on the basis of the most recent evaluation in 2019, we are currently reviewing the environmental and social policy of the bank for 2 specific goals. First of all, the evaluation has highlighted the fact that whilst we share the same reach as the World Bank and the Islamic Development Bank, a number of points that needed to be clarified, and such clarification would reduce the burden of, those preparing the lending documents, and for those who seek to access bank loans. And this will be my parting shot. I would like to thank the civil society department of the bank and all of you who are in this room for your participation in the various regions, that is in French, English, and Portuguese, on the draft revised policy document or paper. And rest assured that we've captured all your comments, and including the contributions and comments from member countries. And within the next week, we'll be back to the board to, report the results of that evaluation. And by the end of the year, hopefully, to be realistic, we could have an updated policy on environmental and social safeguards. So that much for the first point. And the second issue, I have touched on it previously. The role of civil society organizations and NGOs is critically important in the implementation of projects implemented by the bank from the environmental and social standpoint. And the rationale is that, as you are well aware, in the best case scenario, we go 2 or twice to on support missions to the borrowers. But of course, that is one-off, and you have ongoing monitoring. And as the bank, we always feel that civil society organizations and NGOs are the third eye of the bank on the ground. You know, in respect of those implementing those projects, that helps to draw the attention of the developers as to what may, you know, constitute a risk or an adverse impact and undermine a development. That is your pivotal role. And each time you have sounded the alarm bell on something that is not going right, the bank has very solid processes that are also improved, you know, continuously to hear you out and to check out what you have said and to pull your comments and contributions to ensure the best possible implementation of the project. And that watchdog role on behalf of the bank and all of you who are here, I'd like to commend you, to congratulate you, and urge you, as it were, or appeal, because you know, it's a labor of love, and you're putting your resources. You sometimes take risk to help us to serve as this environmental and social watchdog. I would like to appeal that you do not relent. Our dialogue is always productive. Maybe our views may not converge all the time, but you realize that when we work together, we pick the pebbles, we speak together, we work with the communities, and we always find solutions so that the projects can have an even greater positive impact. And so I will end on these 2 points. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond and to say more. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Maman Issa. I'm concerned about the time, and I think we should continue if you have no objections, because we might lose half of the audience. It's getting to 5 o'clock. So I would now ask, please stay here because they will have questions for you. I would now ask Dr. Natalie Chinje, the lead advisor to the Secretary General. Natalie advises the Secretary General in all matters of operations and concerning the board. She's also responsible for the effective and efficient implementation of the board-approved disclosure and access to information policy, with a direct focus on strategic planning, design, and coordination of the DAI. As we had discussed earlier, a year ago, the civil society felt there was a lack of transparency in information sharing with the bank, and Natalie is here to demystify that whole idea. I would also like to invite on stage David Simpson. David Simpson is the director of the Independent Recourse Mechanism at the bank. Okay, yes. He served as the interim head of the Independent Project Complaint Mechanism for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and he also has served as the advisor to the Independent Accountability Mechanisms Network. He was the former director of Standards and Collaboration Governance at the international non-profit think tank Accountability in London. He is also a former executive director of the Center for Ethics and Corporate Policy and is a qualified mediator with the International Mediation Institute. Over the span of his career, he has carried out projects with many organizations, including the Government of Mozambique, Transparency International, HSBC, and the UN-led Principles for Responsible Investment. Welcome, David. The last person I'd like to invite is Director Yerobalde. Yerobalde is a director who has 24 years of experience, 17 of which are with the African Development Bank. He has also been the resident director for Sierra Leone and the country manager for Ghana. Okay. It doesn't matter where you sit, you will still speak. Okay, so Yero is in charge of is the manager and lead coordinator of the Transition States Coordination Office of the ADB, and he oversees and leads the implementation of the ADB Fragility Agenda. He also coordinates its work and analytical, strategic, and operation levels on addressing fragility and building resilience. Welcome, Yerobalde. Okay, unfortunately, I'm going to have to rush us because I have been told we are losing people both here and online. So as much as possible, let's be as brief and as simple as we can, ensuring that what we say is not bank language, but common language so that everybody in the room understands. Thank you very much. Natalie, please go ahead. Thank you.
Merci, Maria. Good afternoon. Some of people who are joining us from outside of West Africa. It's indeed a privilege for me to be here this afternoon to talk about disclosure and access to information to the civil society organization. You are our champions. As we said earlier on, you are our experts on the ground. You are innovators. We really rely on you to get our policies as well as our strategies right. So it's indeed a pleasure for me to be here. I'm going to stick to the time, 10 minutes or less. So what am I going to do? I had planned to induct you to our policy quite briefly, but also to talk about our disclosure and access to information practices. What are we doing on the ground, and what is available in terms of information resources for you. What I also intend to do is to culminate the presentation with what we have achieved together with the civil society organizations, as well as with other bank colleagues from other departments. So next slide, please. Next, please. Our president was here this morning, and I think when he left, I could see a lot of energy in the room from everyone. We ended up dancing here. But what he said something quite important in November 2020 during the Civil Society Forum. He said transparency and accountability are critical. And we have these as key requirements in the bank support to countries. Indeed, on ne peut pas parler de la transparence.
We cannot talk about transparency and accountability without referring to access to information, which is all the more important. So in the bank, we are always striving to boost our efforts to provide information to the various stakeholders, and the president's statement is so important, and it will be part of my presentation that focuses on our policy, disclosure and access policy.
Let's just a quick understanding of the policy. The bank, as a development finance institution here, has at its heart really the growth of the African continent. But at the same time, also the bank creates various instruments to make sure that it is done properly. Transparency and accountability are extremely important for the bank. That's why we, as the African Development Bank Group, were one of the first IFI to have a disclosure and access to information policy dating back to 1997. Since then, we've revised our policy in 2004 and in 2012. So this afternoon, my focus will be really on the 2012 disclosure and access to information policy. What is it all about? What have we done? And why have we even, put such a policy in place? So next slide, please. The policy is really about promoting good governance. So when the banks or our board approved the 2012 policy, which became effective on the 3rd of February 2013, the intent here was that, okay, we believe in transparency, we believe in good governance, but we also believe in the principle around that, really accountability. Accountability is extremely important. So the 2012 policy that is being executed now really revolves around that. We wanted to reaffirm to our stakeholder our strong commitment towards good governance, towards accountability, and towards transparency. And what was quite unique about the 2012 policy, which has been executed at the moment, is that we departed from an initial policy that limited the type of information that we could disclose. So the 2004 policy will have said, for instance, that you can only disclose XYZ. And we say, no, it's not the right approach. Let's maximize information disclosure and access. So what we did rather in 2012, we created a list of exceptions. We put maximization of information at the forefront of whatever we do within our bank. So it is very important that we understand that we are here as a key principle to maximize bank information across our operation, but obviously we are also an institution. We need to safeguard the organization. We have a list of exceptions that has specific categories of information that cannot be disclosed. Some of them actually could be disclosed over a period of time. Next slide, please. So how do we ensure that our governance, even within the bank, is so strong? There is a unit within the bank that looks specifically at information disclosure, which is so interlinked with record management. That unit is in charge of the annual program and ensuring that, obviously, our activities are aligned with our disclosure and access to information policy. That's very important. We need to make sure that it is well executed. And how do we do that? We need to bring our people along. We need to create knowledge product. We need to sensitize even our bank staff who work on the ground with you on those different projects so that they also have a good understanding of what the policy is all about. So capacity building is done internally to also facilitate the engagement that the civil society organization have with bank staff. So we do quite a lot of that, and the Secretariat has an important role to play as far as that is concerned. We track and we report on our activities. There's an annual report that we have. For the past 3 years, we have published the annual report every single year. The most recent one is available on the bank website and accessible to you all. The next key level for us, the bank has mechanism of appeal. You may want some information from the bank. When you send us an email, it goes straight to the Secretariat. At that level, we can filter. But we also give you the right to appeal should you not be happy with the decision that has been made. And the very first level of appeal will be the record management and information disclosure committee. The committee is there. The committee meets on average 3 times a year to discuss various issues, align with the work program, align also with the implementation of the strategy as a whole. And the last level is the appeal panel that has also, provision has been made for that within the bank policy. Next slide, please. Talking about disclosure, we cannot disclose information that is not classified. We need to understand that each and every bank staff has the responsibility as a creator of a document or as the originator of that document to classify the information that he has at his disposal. And we have 2 main types of information classification because it's on the basis of the classification of that information that we can disclose. So for instance, information that are public has been classified as public information will readily be made available. And we have different regimes that we use within the bank. We have what we call simultaneous disclosure. We have post-internal clearance within a specific department that make some information readily available to the public. So that is happening, and we're quite happy, with the progress that we made as far as that is concerned. We also have the restricted part, which is subdivided into two levels, strictly confidential and confidential. The confidential ones can be disclosed over a period of time. Thank you. Next slide, please. I hope I'm still doing well. I'm not going to go through those details, but I would like to invite you to engage with me on this specific type of document that could be disclosed. I spoke earlier on about the list of exception or the negative list of those information that cannot readily be disclosed. For instance, next slide, we have what we call deliberative information that are still under discussion. We have not made any final decision. We cannot readily disclose that information to you. The communication, for instance, between the president, the board, and our governors also are in that list of exception. And matters, investigative matter, like, for instance, asking for a name of a whistleblower, we can't disclose that. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide. Now, what I would like to do, my colleagues have talked a lot about the bank being this organization that always reflects on its own activities. The bank being the premier development bank on the continent that always wants to do better and better for its people. That's why we have the responsibility to go back and to review our policy. We have the responsibility to go and assess ourselves and also take into account all the different feedback that we receive at forums such as the CSO forum or our open days, or even feedback from our internal colleagues. Next slide. I would like to say that recently we completed our implementation review and assessment of how we have been executing the disclosure and access to information policy from 2012 to about 2021. We have come back with some strong recommendations. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but the key recommendation behind the review was really about, again, CSO engagement. We need to enhance our engagement with the CSO. We've done exceptionally well. I mean, under President Adesina, what we have done so far, we have a dedicated department or division that looks after that. Zineb and her team are doing a fantastic job. But it's still not enough, looking at the dire needs, that are all out there on the ground. But we work very closely with our colleagues internally to make sure that we are in a position to still achieve the bank's development goal and mandate. So, thank you. I'll be wrapping up soon. Next slide, please. Amongst those recommendations, also looking at other avenues and methods of disclosing bank information for us is quite important. I would like to walk you, next slide, go through the slide on information resources. How do we engage with CSOs and so forth? We spoke extensively about that, but I want to go through the key facts. Some of the key facts that are important. The disclosure and access to information requests are increasing. If you look at the number of requests that we receive, let's say from 2014 to 2022, it's unbelievable. We've moved from 15. I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide, please. Next slide. We've moved from just about 15 requests to more than 800 requests within a year over that period of time. It just shows the interest that we've seen from our civil society organization as far as bank information is concerned. And the interest has come from various players. It has come from civil society organization. Interestingly, top of the list is the private sector. They come to us. They use our information, our knowledge product to run the businesses. We've also seen a lot of interest from other IFI partners. The bank has various portals where you can download information. A very good one is the project portal data, as you can see here, where you can look at the bank's operation across different countries, across different bank entities, and what have you. Next slide, please. I should be done now. Next slide. Well, I'm not going to spend too much time on the communication. We've said it here, we continue to strengthen our CSO engagement and outreach through various platforms. Next slide. And we see you as our best allies. And this has been the outcome. Today, when we can stand here proudly and to say that the African Development Bank sovereign operation was ranked #1 by an independent organization. It is definitely the outcome of this engagement that we've had with the civil society. Transparency is extremely important for us. It does improve our institution's reputation. It enhances our credibility amongst peers and amongst other partners. So I would like to thank you all, our champions, our experts on the ground, for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm sorry, I'm going to rush you. David, please. He has a PowerPoint presentation, so you have to go up there. You can do it from there.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking for the assistance of our PowerPoint folks, so be quick on that, huh? So good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Simpson. I'm with the Independent Recourse Mechanism. I think a lot has been said in terms of where we find things in here. That's not my presentation, but should I pass the mic? Number 4, apparently, we're looking for. So the IRM really aims to provide fair, independent, and effective recourse for individuals, for workers, and for communities. As my colleague here was saying earlier, we have some really great policies in place, procedures, and aspects of that serve as safeguards. And essentially, if we're playing a game of kind of football, we have a very strong defense team. But like in any strong defense team, sometimes goals get in and things go wrong. And so that's really the place of then the IRM. And so rather than kind of go through that, I think I'll start with a story and best demonstrated through story. So we're going to have story time here. It's not bedtime story. So, but we'll go through it. So here we start off with Amba. Amba's a subsistence farmer, like 60% of small farm farmers in Africa. And she's existing here, and she's growing her vegetables. Next slide, please. So as she goes to, one of the things she gets every morning, she wakes up. If we can have the next slide. She wakes up every morning really early, and she travels to the nearest town. She does this about twice a week, because obviously she's a farmer, and then she comes back and has a place to sell them. So that's where she goes. Next slide, please. But she's also quite savvy, because Amba, she's done this for a while, and she knows that in order to sell your vegetables well, you need to get a good stand. And we know that a good African market here is very boisterous, lots of sound, and the best place is always next to the coffee stand. And that's where Amba's going, and so she gets up very early every morning to head right for that market stand. Next slide. But one day she gets up, and on the way here, you see Amba there on the far right there, traveling towards her market. She gets up early in the morning, and she sees, oh, there's a new project here. It's a climate change project. We should all be excited. We should be lauding this. Great. But it's kind of in my way of normally getting there. And AFDB, responding to the climate crisis, and let us underline that this is a crisis, it's putting in together a solar power farm. Next slide, please. But now, where's this project located? It's right in between, almost equidistant, between Amba's village and the market where she's going. So if you can see there on the right, normally she would walk 4 kilometers. But now, because of this project, she's going to have to walk 18 kilometers. Okay, so we've added to your day of what you can do. Next slide. So obviously, Amba's not terribly impressed with this, right? Nobody asked her about what she thought of this project. And yeah, she's not very impressed, because this is going to actually really, inconvenience her to a certain degree. So next slide. So her travel would actually increase quite substantially this way, because she'd have to go through this project. And so here she's thinking about all of that and what she would need to do. And as you said, no one's really asked her. So one day, while she's at this project, she asks the head project engineer, really this is inconvenient for me. And of course, the project engineer says, I'm sorry, but this is really important to our capital city. This is a green energy project. Yeah, you're inconvenienced a little, but, we're just going to have to move on with this anyway. So it just kind of laughs her off and says, thank you, Amba, for coming out, but, just carry on with your days, because this is a really important project for us. So let's move on. Next slide. But what are the risks for Amba here? This is more than just a small inconvenience, right? She's going to have to get up at night in order to travel to the market now. There's going to be increased risks of wild animals attacks. She can fall asleep on the way. She can get robbed by bandits. There's increased risk in terms of GBV on the way, in terms of traveling at night and everything. And she's kind of thinking, what are these real risks here? Okay, next slide. Luckily, however, Amba is connected to a local NGO, someone maybe like yourselves who are working in the community. And this isn't an NGO that's necessarily connected to solar power. It's an NGO that's connected to female entrepreneurs. But they happen to know, one, that this project is supported by AFDB. So one, that's already a plus, because we know they have excellent systems in place, safeguards in place to protect the communities for it. And two, they also know that it has a mechanism in place, that of the independent recourse mechanism, where she can take her complaints forward because they weren't listened to at the project level. Next slide. So that's exactly what they do. The local CSO helps facilitate this, and it's not an easy process, so they have to kind of help maybe write. Then maybe there's issues of literacy, there's issues of language, and so they connect up with the IRM, or MIR, as the name is in French. Next slide. And of course, then we go through a process at MIR to validate this complaint. And if we can register it, we bring it on board to decide, can we move to the next level? And there's several levels in doing that. And then there's different functions that we would have. On one hand, there's a function of complaint handling, and the other, there's an investigation. And part of that is decided in consultation with the parties and with the complainants as well. And so that brings us close to the end. Everyone's very scared of Maria now. But our next slide. I mean, this is really where our goal is. Our goal is AFDB is have a positive impact for all, for both the capital city, for the clean energy, and for Amba. And I think there we can go to the next slide and end this. And I said it was a bedtime story. Well, I said it was a story, but it could be a love story between the bank and CSOs. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you just hold on a minute. Really, you must clap for David again. That was the best lesson in communicating a message I have heard in a long time. Please, give it to David. Thank you. Okay. Now we will move to Yero, please.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Zainab, also for really the opportunity. We appreciate this very much. And thank you all civil society organizations here present for really participating at this very, very important forum. And David, thank you for bringing home all that we've been talking about. Thank you so much. That was a good story. You know, the opening session during which President Adesina shared his vision on civil society engagement within the forum's theme of this year has helped all of us to appreciate the progress and successes that we've made so far as far as civil society engagement is really concerned. President Adesina also clearly outlined where work individually and collectively as institutions remains to be done. So I would like to really, project my own contributions in terms of emphasizing on the centrality of the civil society engagement in our fragility and resilience agenda in the bank. So if we can have that one slide presentation now is the time for it. But first of all, before I go into that, let me express my gratitude to all the civil society organizations that contributed to the development of the 2022-2026 strategy for addressing fragility and building resilience in Africa during our consultation processes. Your inputs have been very, very helpful in shaping the bank's fragility strategy. As a result of these consultations, the bank's new fragility strategy, which is, of course, your own strategy, is deeply anchored on the understanding that a healthy and engaged civil society is a key ingredient for building resilience. In this regard, we sincerely look forward to working with all the civil society organizations for the successful operationalization of the strategy. So I will now like to elaborate on key themes that underpin our strategic approach and give some examples that demonstrate how we intend to strengthen our operational partnership with civil society organizations. And if time permits, I will conclude by sharing with you lessons learned and recommendations to jointly advance the African Development Bank civil society organization collaboration in fragile settings. That is, if time permits. Because there's a timekeeper there who is always... So, as articulated in the bank's fragility strategy, we truly believe that civil society organizations provide a means for communities to take joint action to address a wide range of challenges, from improving local services to creating livelihood opportunities and mitigating the effects of climate change. They are also important conduits for citizens to mobilize and engage with government and promote transparency, accountability, and inclusion. President Adesina spoke on this morning. Civil society organizations have a key role to play in preventing and addressing fragility, as well as to foster inclusive community-level resilience in conflict settings, as well as in climate-induced vulnerabilities. This includes restoring and sustaining intercommunal dialogue, building or rebuilding trust between authorities at the national or local level, and society at large. As such, civil society organizations are co-partners of governments and development partners to help strengthen social cohesion, build social capital, especially in situations where the state has been or is absent, real or perceived, such as in conflict zones. This is how the dialogue with civil society organizations help development finance institutions like the African Development Bank to remain engaged, even in crisis situations. Prevention is the central tenet of the bank strategy, including addressing the underlying multidimensional and complex drivers of fragility and root causes of conflict. To this end, the strategy encapsulates a paradigm shift towards community wealth creation. Civil society organizations have a pivotal role to play in this paradigm shift. Csos, with their strong community bonds, the trust they have, the knowledge in their hands, and the networks that they have are crucial in harnessing local capital. This could be physical capital, it could be natural, it could be social capital even. And this is essential for sustained peace and inclusive resilience. So they have a big role to play in that. Many civil organizations have long experience and deep expertise in working with communities in the most difficult environments. They know the complexities that are behind deep-rooted drivers of fragility and causes of conflicts, as well as sources of resilience. These CSOs are often trusted by the communities and therefore important partners for the bank as we increase our attention to create wealth at the community level through the development of local private sector. So really, CSOs have a big role to play even in catalyzing private sector development in our communities. In addition, Csos often have effective regional networks that connect communities across borders and foster peace-building initiatives, such as the West African Network of Peace Building, WANEP, among others. These regional networks offer more opportunities for us to work together as we share a common approach and understanding of the importance of early warning and early action, such as through our engagement with the regional economic communities like ECOWAS, IGAD, etc. Our recent Mano River Union Regional Fragility Assessment, jointly conducted with the Mano River Union Secretariat and the United Nations, is a good example of how the bank seeks critical inputs from civil society organizations to ensure that their views and concerns are reflected in initiatives that seek to harness peace dividends in the region by connecting people, accelerating economic transformation, and consolidating peace to prevent the spillover effects of the Sahel crisis, as an example, and a relapse into conflict. I'm glad that today I saw here Haja Saran Kaba, who was the former Secretary General of the Mano River Union. We worked extensively with her in strengthening civil society organizations in the Mano River Union to help sustain and consolidate the peace that that region has experienced over the years. Beyond this, the bank remains a critical player in the Lake Chad Basin region, especially in the implementation of the regional stabilization strategy, by providing financial support and working with the UNDP to articulate the civil society role in the implementation of the stabilization strategy. The bank's support of CSO activities is contributing towards the implementation of territorial action plans that help promote local ownership of recovery efforts in the Lake Chad Basin. The bank's support has also contributed towards the production of an accreditation system for mapping civil society organizations that are active in Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon to be engaged in sustaining peace and building resilience of communities affected by the Boko Haram insurgency. This tool has the potential to maximize digital visibility of civil society partners in hard-to-reach areas, as well as contribute to an early warning system in fragile areas through leveraging data and evidence directly from actors at the community level, so that crises are better mitigated from a prevention angle, but also from a programming standpoint. In the Sahel, our collaboration with the ICRC on women economic empowerment, ongoing in Niger, Mali, and Chad, has been a successful pilot that we plan to expand with both ICRC as well as CSO partners in hard-to-reach communities affected by fragility and conflict. In the Horn of Africa, our engagement with CSOs have been quite instrumental in addressing the effects of drought and rising level of food insecurity. CSOs played an active role in the implementation of the bank's Say No to Farming program in several countries across the Horn of Africa. Similarly, in the Great Lakes region, the civil society organizations continue to play a critical role in building social cohesion, especially in border communities. These are just few examples that illustrate the bank's increased engagement with CSOs in fragile settings. As I said earlier, if time permits, I'll give some lessons learned, but it looks like I've been timed out. So hopefully in the course of the questions and answers, I'll bring out those lessons learned and recommendations. But principally, the bottom line, as the President said, is for us to work together to make sure we increase the impact we are having on the quality of the life of the people. At the end of the day, all this talk, everything is about impact on people. It's about people. So we can join hands. If you take all the lessons learned, it all boils down to what do we do together well to make sure we partner from the humanitarian, development, and peace nexus approach, making sure that we impact positively on the lives of the people that we all serve, even those that are in very critical stages like those in conflict settings across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yerobalde, and I want to thank all the panelists and apologize for the harassment, but it can't be helped. We are trying to keep time. From what you have all said, it's very clear to me that the only way the bank can strengthen its impact on the ground with communities is to engage meaningfully with CSOs. So I encourage you all as a challenge, for everything you do over the next 1 year, find some funds to engage with civil society, and this is meaningfully interact to ensure that they are mainstreamed into civil society programs. That would be extremely helpful, and it would also help as a success story for bank projects, for them to see how things can be different if you engage with civil society. Okay, because we don't want you to run away before you speak to us, I'm going to ask the panelists to think about 3 key things they would like you to remember before you leave. But first, I'm going to go then into the Q&A. If anybody has any questions or comments for the panelists, this is your time. We have given it an hour because we know we have given 6 presentations, and therefore there might be quite a few comments or questions. I need a rapporteur, Edward, and some other members of the team. Please write down the questions so that the panelists have them on hand to respond. And I need somebody for the microphone. Where is Hafsa? Hafsa, is that you? Please, come and help me with the microphone detail. Or Luther, or somebody from the department. There is anytime there's a hand raised, please take the microphone and give it to them. Thank you. You only have 2.
Merci.
Thank you, Delonest Mupi from the Ivorian Cso Advocacy. I would like to that we want the ADB to assist us in our advocacy to be the vuvuzela with Ivorian authorities on 3 points. The first one is the implementation decree for the law on the coastline. This law was adopted a long time ago, but it is not yet effective because the implementation decree is not there. We've talked a lot about agriculture, but we've not talked about coastal erosion. Also, they're taken into account in national policy, gender climate change, in addition to women, youth, and people with handicaps. These are vulnerable people. You know, since we talk about adaptation, we need to cover them. And lastly, a law on climate change in order to cater for new stakes. And we will come to request an audience to present to you the studies we have done on the situation on the ground so that can help us to be the vuvuzela on these public issues. Thank you.
Bien, merci. Mon nom c'est Luku.
Thank you, Luku Fijil. I'm from FERIAD, the Federation of Energy, Environment, and Sustainable Development. I wish to thank the moderators and the ADB for organizing this meeting. I want to speak to the issue of environmental and social safeguards. Let me thank the director who gave a very clear presentation. I want to tell you that within society, we follow the investment projects in terms of environmental and social compliance, and the social aspect is very important because the population is often impacted and they don't know where to go to for solutions. We've been strengthening capacity. There are lots of problems relating to the social monitoring of investment programs. We would like to meet you and discuss with you and share data with you so that we can deepen our thinking in this connecting. My second point has to do with assisting negotiators at the various COPs relating to environment, but more specifically on climate and the COP27. It is true that the ADB assists the negotiators, but I would like to know, for those of us who are not negotiators from civil society, what is done for us concretely? CSOs have initiatives at national, regional, and international levels. They need to be present at these various COPs to carry out advocacy and negotiate a number of projects for our country. For our association, it is thanks to one of the COPs that we have a promoter negotiating with the state of Cote d'Ivoire to begin a big program covering the center, north, and east of Cote d'Ivoire. That is why we keep asking for the ADB. I'm almost done.
Bon, vous m'excusez, lui, il va traduire.
I didn't get what you said. Could he translate it for me? Yes, my third question has to do with plans, action plans. I think I'll stop there so that other people can speak. But I would like to know if the loss and damage aspect is covered by these action plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your understanding.
Merci. Moi, c'est
Thank you. I am Robert Mabala. I'm from the DRC, and I work for the network of Central African NGO platform. I would like to make a comment. We organized webinars, a virtual meeting during the Regional Forum for Central Africa, and we raised the issue of capacity building and advocacy. Now, concerning this regional forum, I wish to recall here, the independence review mechanism. We've worked a lot, but we don't have a response relating to capacity building because all the organizations are still waiting for some response in terms of capacity building. And the same goes to the person, the last speaker, who spoke to the Coalition for Peace. We are a similar organization, ONEP, in West Africa, but we cover Central Africa. We also need to strengthen our capacity in terms of early warning systems. This is a sub-region you know very well, where there's a lot of conflict at the Grand Lakes, Lake Chad, and we really need the support of the ADB in relation to these problems. Lastly, I would like to know the link that exists between the pre-COP 27 that took place in Kinshasa and what we are doing here, particularly the involvement of the bank in all the issues raised at the pre-COP 27 in Kinshasa. Thank you.
Much. Okay, so we'll go to the 3 questions online and then respond to those before we continue. We will come back to you, sir.
The first question is from Babaka Diouf. The solar projects are laudable. Is the bank planning to finance the production of renewable technologies on this continent to stop imports and to fast-track the energy transition?
I think goes to concerns. Is it a requirement that each project financed by the AFDB has an environmental assessment report attached to the proposal? Je pense que c'est une question.
I think that sounds a question.
On the bank's ESG rating, does the bank plan to produce a full annual sustainable development report? And Emmanuel Ndri still asks another question. What are the tools that the bank makes available to communities to build energy resilience? These are the 4 questions we got online.
Okay, thank you very much, Edward. I think it's easier to go down the line. Each of you has 3 minutes to address the questions that concern you because we have to go back this way. So, Natalie, you have 3 minutes. And Jerry, was there any question for you? I don't think so. You, there are quite a few for you, Maman. The rest of you, there are quite a few. So I'm going to give you the mic. Here. Oh, then.
Merci.
Thank you immensely for that question.
Report. The bank publishes the ADE, the African Development Effectiveness Report. With regard to information disclosure, we publish an annual report every single year. Like I said, our most recent report is available on the bank's website. We have also conducted an implementation review, which was more of an internal exercise to inform potentially future policy revision. Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you. I think a number of questions were addressed to me, and I'll start in the order they were posed, starting with the lady's question on policies in Côte d'Ivoire, and I note that you would be coming to discuss with us. We are waiting for that opportunity, but in the time being, we'll do the best to be the vuvuzelas of climate in Africa, but we'll do that in an orderly manner because, you know, climate issues are regulated at a global level by way of the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate, and countries are stakeholders. And of course, you have to bear in mind the sovereignty of those countries, and that is a principle in climate negotiations. But that is a proper question you have raised, and I have noted the recent law on climate change, and that is a need that most countries are expressing in the context of the Paris Agreement negotiations, and a process to help countries to improve their climate policies. They started off with
des prévisionnels et des intentions pour avoir des plans.
The NDCs, and now this is reflected by action plans, no longer pledges, but these have been translated into action plans, and now we are planning to have longer-term strategies on the climate that would also be translated by climate policy. Some countries have succeeded in that endeavor, and I believe Cote d'Ivoire would do same. Now, a question on the support to negotiators. Why are non-negotiators not supported? We support non-negotiators, and indeed, in some cases, we have supported civil society organizations by sponsoring the attendance of their members at some meetings and even at the COP, and that we have not lost sight of. As to whether action plans include loss and damage, that is a critical question that will come up in Sharm el-Sheikh because loss and damage is highly controversial because countries of the north are pushing back because it entails compensation, while the small countries, the island states are pushing to be compensated for loss and damage. And so we are going to discuss this further in Sharm el-Sheikh. I was referring to the small island states, and also the question relating to the link on the between the pre-COP that took place in Kinshasa and this forum. And actually, the climate is the main theme of this meeting, and it was the theme of the bank's annual meetings, and it was also the theme of our African economic outlook. And I wonder if you should remember that 2022 is the year of Africa's COP, and you also have the Copenhagen Forum, which we have to prepare, and we are preparing our voice here now for Sharm el-Sheikh. So the two conferences are related, and I believe the last point I have to address relates to funding of solar projects. Maybe my colleague will take that one, but I would say that solar projects are relevant in the context of climate, but it doesn't mean that it is relevant on some other scores. But I do not think I'm qualified to discuss that matter. I'll leave it to the more qualified colleagues. I believe I had 4 questions addressed to me, and I'm going to take them one after the other. The first question, which was also a sort of an appeal, that is social issues in monitoring for NGOs who are following up on that matter. Where do you knock? You have 3 points of entry. You have the recourse mechanism within the project. If you do not hear back or you're not happy with the response, you have the bank country office, which is the entry point to the bank's management, and technically should look into that matter as appropriate. And David made a presentation, and if you are not happy, of course, you have the independent recourse mechanism, and there is no hard and fast principle. It depends where you are. You can, knock on the doors of any of those mechanisms to fix the matter. Regarding capacity building, for you, in that regard, I would say yes. I must acknowledge that it is not yet really expanded to NGOs, but generally now, all project units on the African continent receive training on how to implement the environmental and social safeguards in projects funded by the bank. It is done consistently across the countries, and I think the best approach now is to have the units and the NGOs, and this can be done remotely, to deliver training for everyone at little or no cost. So if you need a meeting, the civil society division is there to provide our details, and we can always engage. The third question is of the essence as to whether all projects sponsored by the bank are undergo environmental and social reviews? I would say yes, it is actually the point of entry for project preparation. Not a single request for funding received by the bank is not reviewed, on the environmental and social safeguards aspect from the beginning throughout the project and at the close of the project. And this is an exception, and it hardly ever happens. If the social and environmental risk is extremely high and cannot be mitigated, the bank does not finance. That is what the policy dictates. But these safeguards are there to improve the budget for higher dividends. So public-private partnerships, investment, funds, projects, all of them have to be reviewed environmentally and socially and by the board before you can have any support from the bank for sound implementation.
Responded in English because the precedent question was in English. But I will go on the last one in English. Someone has asked whether we publish, right, Natalie, ESG sustainability report. Yeah, we have started, kind of initiative. We will very soon, maybe by 2023, create a kind of platform that we call an ESG entry point for Africa, stakeholders. That will be used by private sector people, stakeholders, and also by rating agencies, because nowadays, apart from South Africa, I think these initiatives are very, very limited in Africa, and we have found that it is good, given the importance that ESG is taking, that we start publishing ESG and sustainability report. We are working on it, and you will see it coming soon. Thank you very much.
I'll very briefly, so I won't. The wrath of Maria is another thing, but just very quickly, I think there was probably 1.5 questions. Maybe just following up what my colleague, Director Issa, was saying about the different levels. I mean, obviously, we're in the business of sustainability, and the most sustainable aspects of a complaint is closest to where it's happening, and the project site is where we want things to be resolved. And that's a preference of us. Now, we can escalate it at different levels, and sometimes it's not possible to take it to the local level. That's fine. We have waivers for those, and we consider those. And at the IRM, in any case, we do a kind of an intake process right at the very beginning, in which we would say, well, we're going to push this back to the project level, or indeed we're going to push this back just recently under our new rules to the bank management itself to figure this out, because I think it's pretty close to figuring it out. But that's another element. The other area to touch on is just this concept again, is that all operations, all projects are covered by the safeguards. And I think this is really important, because as it's going to turn later to an issue of kind of transparency and everything else, because this also includes financial intermediaries within the bank. And as you know, there's a great deal of financial assets that trickle down to other financial institutions from the bank. But there's also a responsibility of them to uphold those same obligations. Sometimes we don't know. It's less transparent sometimes when it's coming from, Bank A or Bank B or Bank C. But those same safeguards apply, and those are the same things we want. Specifically, there was a question about capacity building. And maybe the best way to address that is that we're okay in terms of building awareness around mechanisms and specifically around the independent recourse mechanism. But we have to be careful about not getting into the business of capacity development of CSOs at our level, because we occupy that space of a kind of an independent, almost quasi-regulator. And so we have to be careful that often we're mediating disputes, and so we can't be kind of funding one side. And so we play very carefully, because on the other hand, we know there's absolute need on some counts. How do we support complainants to bring complaints forward? Sometimes, that's of a very basic nature. Do they have sufficient, money on their SIM card to send us a text or to participate in a process? And it's at that level that we're at often at different times. And that's the area that we think we can probably intervene without crossing that line. But I think that's where we're talking about in terms of capacity development. But we can continue to look at in areas that we can do that, maybe with others, and we also work with other civil society organizations who have a freer hand, or funders or donors. They're allowed to step into that role, and we're happy to have them there.
Now, maybe I'll just quickly respond to the issue of the coalition of the NGOs in Central Africa, just similar to the ONEP. So, of course, we will be very happy to engage you on it because, as I said, prevention is the central tenet of our strategy, and early warning systems is an integral part of that prevention agenda. So we would definitely want to engage you more on that.
Okay, so we'll go to the next 3 questions. There was somebody whose hand was up here for the long time. 1, 2, there are no ladies in the house. I need 1 lady. Those are 2 men. Gender equity, even at questions. So hello. These 2, number 1, sir, look here. Look here. Number 1. Number 2 is behind you, and the lady.
Hani Ibrahim from. I have a comment, not a question. First of all, I would like to thank you to raise the concern of funding NGOs or civil society organizations to do the required job, which was highlighted by every speaker, from the president to everyone. I would like to urge the different bank departments to have its own programs for civil society organization according to its function. And for example, Natalia is talking about transparency. Why not we have a funding mechanism for increasing the engagement of civil society organizations in transparency and accountability? This is one. Second, I would like AFDB to communicate with the governments, because everyone, even the government, asks NGOs to play a role and to be more effective, efficient. But at the same time, they put pressures, restrictions on the work of NGOs. So in every funding for governments, should the bank negotiate a role for NGOs to work, to play. So by this, we increase the engagement and enhance the role of civil society organizations in development and holding the governments accountable to the bank and to the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am Ms. Ghana from Ethiopia. I have 1 question. Now, the topic says induction to the civil society organizations. The question that always I have is that does the bank prepare field offices in each country so that they work, or how much the bank encourages and prepares field offices at the country level so that they work with respective civil society organizations? That is what I don't see. If the passion and the initiation that we see here is at the field office level, particularly what I know is my country. In fact, many NGOs should have understood what the bank is thinking about. This is really it has been a question since I was a committee member and until today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My name is Emerance Tushime. I'm from Rwanda, the Programs Officer of the Pan-African Farmers Organization. So my question goes to Mr. Ali Hamdou, the Director in charge of climate change. So my question is on the access to climate fund by farmers organization. We all agree that farmers, mostly smallholder farmers, are the most affected by the climate change impact. However, according to the study done by IFAD in 2020, a small percentage of climate funds reach to farmers, mostly smallholder farmers. To be specific, in this study, it was mentioned that in a period of 2017 to 2018, just 3% of the climate fund has arrived to farmers. Now, during your presentation, you've mentioned a great work that is being done by the bank to mobilize funds to support climate action. Now, I would like to ask what are the mechanisms in place to ensure that climate funds are reaching out to farmers, smallholder farmers, farmers organization. Secondly, I would like to mention that as Pan-African Farmers Organization, we are now in a process of putting in place a climate facility for farmers organization. We are working with our partners, IFAD and AgriCode, and I would like to seize this opportunity to invite the bank to join our cause, because we really look forward to see how we can support farmers' action in terms of resilience and adaptation. Thank you.
Microphone, please.
We are addressing the questions online. I don't know if you want us to. Yeah, exactly.
Chair, your microphone, please, Chair. Interpreters cannot hear the chair. May the chair speak into a microphone, please?
Thank you so much. My name is Christabel Piri. I'm from the Southern Africa Trust. Just two quick points. Thank you, Natalie, for the presentation that you were able to share. I actually see an opportunity, and I think maybe Njeri, you can also comment on this, in terms of the knowledge that is generated by civil society organizations in this room. How do we ensure there's a portal or a knowledge space where we can all share that information? Because most of the organizations are producing a lot of things across the work that is also important for the bank, but also in terms of the work that they're doing. How do we create that platform where everybody can have access to information, and can we facilitate that? The second point is on the civil society forum. One of the biggest values out of this forum is the networking that is taking place across civil society organizations from each region. And organizations that have not worked together, there's been opportunities for them to meet and to be able to exchange and share ideas in terms of how they can work together beyond the engagement with the bank. How do we enhance that moving forward and creating this platform for learning? Maybe sharing experiences in the different regions. So for example, it could be in Southern Africa or East Africa. How do we build on that cross-learning, sharing experiences, building each other's capacity? Can we look at that in this coming year, where we can have sessions where people can actually share across specific thematic focus areas? Opportunity for capacity building, for learning, and those that are advanced in terms of certain work can share with other civil society organizations in the region. Thank you.
Et bonsoir, et merci.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the panelists. My question is addressed to Mr. Yero. In his statement, he mentioned the bank's work in a hostile context, and to relate the theme of this forum to current circumstances, I would say that over the last 5-10 years in the Sahel, we are gripped, in addition to the impact of climate change, to conflict. I wonder if the bank has designed or is in the process of designing an appropriate strategy and to engage the civil society in the resilience of the population that lives in an area where they face a double whammy, that is climate change and insecurity, that prevents them from undertaking their productive activities. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Sanusi Ababa. I am working for CARE International. Thank you.
Alors, bonsoir à tous.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Obwe Anisse. I'm the National Coordinator for PACCHA in Cote d'Ivoire. I double as the chair of the Club for Sustainable Development. My question is on the youth, but before that, I would like to indicate that my organization has started Summer University on Climate Justice, because we know that the youth play a pivotal role in fighting climate change, but we need to train a larger number of youth, and hundreds of youth are being trained in Asia and Africa to fight climate change. Secondly, there is a youth initiative, a digital initiative to combat climate change, and we know that in Cote d'Ivoire, through social media, we're able to influence some projects, including government projects that encroach on some national reserves, and we are training young activists to influence decision making. So I'd like to know whether at the bank there is a planned and dedicated program for youth training in the area of climate justice, or for youth climate activists. Thank you. Or young climate activists.
We're going to go back to the panelists. Please, if you can just 3 minutes. Jerry, I saw there were 2 questions for you. I can also assist at the end of your contribution towards that.
No, I think I just want to respond to the issue of the double whammy in the Sahel, climate change, insecurity. And you're right, in fact, we do engage all stakeholders in our interventions. When this morning, in the earlier session, our country manager in Ghana gave an overview of our engagement framework through our country strategy papers. Civil societies are an integral part of our engagement. So for all our interventions in all the countries in the Sahel, we do engage the civil society in it. And beyond that also, for our regional operations, we do engage them. But in the case of Sahel, we've even gone a bit more. Recently, I think it was in March, together with the civil society division of the bank, the division headed by Zainab Toure, we organized a training in Niamey for civil society organizations in the Sahel. And we are planning to do one in the Chad for civil society organizations in the Lake Chad Basin. The whole idea is just to put them at the center of our interventions in addressing these complex dynamics that exist, because their knowledge of those dynamics is so important for us in our programming. That is why, so as to respond to your question, yes, indeed, we have civil society engagement at the center of our interventions in the Sahel and other, hotspot regions across Africa.
Thanks. I think I got a couple of questions. Let me begin with the one asked by my sister from Rwanda. Yes, I think the issue of access to climate finance is a challenge for the whole Africa, actually. I don't know whether you know the latest figures, but in 2020, out of the 632 billion climate finance mobilized globally, Africa got access to only 20 billion. And out of the 20 billion, 2 billion were mobilized domestically. It means that Africa only accessed 18% of the global total climate finance. So it shows that it's a big issue in the continent, and it's an issue that we are really taking seriously at the bank. We have a whole division dedicated to climate finance mobilization, and we are working with both internal instruments within the bank and also external instruments to increase Africa's access to climate finance. So maybe let me give an example of one way we could increase access of farmers or farmers' organization to climate finance. We got a recent experience in Ghana through banks funding. We have been able to mobilize another 20 billion from the Green Climate Fund to support women-led farmers' organizations in Ghana to build resilience into their agricultural production. It has been, I think it's still an ongoing experience, but from the way I see it, it's a good model, a template for many other initiatives like that to come. And my suggestion is that if you need to increase farmers' access to climate finance, a good way to do it is to get accredited to most of those, or at least one of those big global climate finance providers. And to get accredited, there is a process that you need to follow. And I'm expecting, for instance, that the Pan-African farmers, how do you call that organization? Farmers organization could request to be accredited to be an implementing entity of the Green Climate Fund or the Global Environment Facility in order to get access to the funding that is available there and deploy this funding in the form of projects. Because the only way you could get access to climate finance is through projects. So you need to make sure that your organization is capable of managing climate funds, is capable of getting accredited, from various aspects, fiduciary standards, environmental and social standards, and also project management standards. So you may need to make sure that you tick the boxes. That's the only way we do, even the bank. In order for us to get accredited to the Green Climate Fund, for instance, we have been through that process, which has been a little bit complex and long. It took us more than 1 year, almost 2 years to get accredited. So it's important that you assess your own capacity and make sure that you are eligible and capable of getting accredited and then being able to mobilize climate finance and deploy that in the form of projects to farmers. And the question from my brother from Côte d'Ivoire, Pakja, c'est vrai, ces questions sont très importantes, à mon avis.
It is true that these issues are very important. The issue of climate justice is very important. In the negotiations today, they are referred to as a just transition. Same idea, different words. I think we don't have training on climate justice, but that's something you have. We can work together to amplify that. An example I'd like to give you is that recently, 1.5 years ago, we launched a competition for the youth for adaptation initiatives led by the youth. This competition, I think, ended yesterday or today. So the idea is to see how young people can submit their initiatives on adaptation, and then we will choose the best initiatives. We'll choose about 20. Last year we chose 15, and then we award the prize at COP25. We'll award about $100,000 US for the initiatives, and from our experience or from the initiatives funded last year are yielding very satisfactory results midterm. So this is something we can discuss and work on together. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Christabel. In terms of how do we deepen, enhance this networking, information sharing, knowledge generation, capacity building, I did talk about the 3 tiers of engagement. So of course at the corporate level we will be having this kind, we normally do have these kinds of fora. At the regional level, I did talk about, first of all, we now have started having civil society consultations on regional projects that are multi-country in nature and cover, different regions. But we also, I did talk about the regional CSO fora that now will become part of this continued engagement every other year. So when we are not having a CSO forum such as this, then we will be organizing the regional CSO fora. Again, that's another opportunity and platform for us to continue sharing information. At the country level, I talked about the CSO Open Day. That's a very, very important platform for engaging with CSOs on a regular basis. When we are developing projects or country strategy papers. So we are constantly engaging with CSOs at the country level. I did also mention the interactive platform that the division has since put up. It is live, it is active, and this is a platform where CSOs will now access. You share information, share your success stories, for purposes of learning and basically information sharing. And lastly, Natalie actually did talk about the newsletter that we produce. Again, that becomes another space where we do collect, pieces of writing knowledge material from CSOs, and we do publish it, and we share it widely. So as long as you're within the CSO database, you're participating in the interactive platform, you're participating in these different fora, definitely we'll keep stepping it up. Clearly, we still could do more, and we are continuing to do more. Thank you.
Can I just add to, because it's part of that, and I think let's just wrap up that part of the institutional part. Is my mic on? Huh?
Yes, it is. Just put it closer.
Okay. So there was one thing about the Ethiopia and liaison with the country offices. I just wanted to say something about that. I think it's important for members of civil society in their respective countries to know, make an effort to know who your CSO officer is before you go to the country office. Because your CSO officer is your best conduit to the country office or to the country manager. It would be more persuasive if you came through the civil society division as opposed to, and then also you understand the engagement is quite new. People are getting to understand the importance of the evolving role of civil society, and a lot of our country managers and director generals have come on board. So you may have felt that way a few years ago, but I'm sure the reception you will receive now is quite different. Thank you.
Okay, merci. Si je puis continuer. Still on the same question on knowledge sharing. I think that was a very good question. And when we started, we say we're coming here to share our practices and our policies, but we are also in a position where we want to welcome contribution and so forth. And I think that what my sister said earlier on is about, what are you currently doing in terms of fora like this? Where does the information go? We have many, many platforms, and I'm not going to repeat what my colleagues have already said. We have the civil society website that is available for information, but we also believe that information sharing should not be one-sided. The whole responsive aspect to it is very important because we need to close the loop to ensure that the engagement has really taken place. So we also encourage the civil society to use, this digital era, with digital content to share what you know of the bank, either with the bank or with the bigger population. In that way, we will be able to achieve the kind of impact that we want to see on the ground. I'm going to stop at that here because I see Maria looking at me.
Thank you. Really, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to really thank you and to apologize that we have to end the session here because people have other commitments. But I encourage you to seek out these individuals over the next 2 days, or over the next day, and please discuss with them. Zainab and her team are available. I am available in case of any questions. Secondly, I'd like to thank the panel, my colleagues, for taking time out to engage with us. I greatly appreciate, and so does the team, and thank you for their insight. All right, everybody, I understand there is no other session. We have taken up all the time, so see you tomorrow. Please, the panel would like a photo, so please. Brenda, please get the photo, man. They want a photo. Are you a photo? He's a video. No, he's a video man. That's what you said. They want a photo. I don't know where the photo is. Use the microphone. Yeah.
Ok. J'ai besoin de l'équipe de photographes, s'il vous plaît. Nous allons faire...
I need a team of photographers for a group picture. We need to have a picture of the panel.
Vous pouvez demander à l'équipe photo de s'approcher, s'il vous plaît. Et autres paparazzi affiliés. Vous êtes les bienvenus également. Oui, vous êtes prêts? Merci. Vous allez nous aider aussi avec le dispositif. Il reste debout, devant, debout, ok. Donc, première photo, comme ça, ok. Monsieur le directeur a dit, let's relax. Yes. Voilà, donc nouvelle photo debout, s'il vous plaît. Voilà. Vous pouvez avancer, ou bien? Voilà, il vous demande d'avancer, voilà. Merci. On fait comment? On met les dames. C'est bon? D'accord. Ah, pour une fois. C'est bon? Ok. Pardon. C'est bon? Ok. Merci Maria, merci à tout le panel. Alors, notre journée tire vers sa fin.
Thank you. We're coming to the close of our business for today. Let me thank Zainab and Maria, our two moderators. Thank you, Zainab, for the innovation and the accountability session. Thank you, Maria. We have used our time fully. For tomorrow, we will be connected online. Tomorrow, we will be having